episode 2, I guess, or part 2 of Arbitration Consternation, a special edition Brewster Baseball Network podcast that became necessary when episode 1 went, well, too long. My name is Ron Collins. I'm the general manager of the Yellow Springs 9, and this is a little series where we're walking through the entirety of the 2035 arbitration decisions team by team. The first episode was all the Johnson League, and so we're going to focus on the Frick League in this episode. And just like the last one, we're going to focus on really just kind of some of the bigger ones, kind of big picture feelings, and we'll go division by division, going from the bottom upward. And I guess we'll go ahead and start with my home division, the Heartland, and the Des Moines Colonels, who Edward has a couple of different cases, the first being Don Bird, who I'm fairly sure will be a non-tendered player, and so he will probably, his $4.4 million will probably come off the books. The second is Dave Brunskill at $4.8 million. I would expect that Brunskill will be retained, pretty much a fairly solid player at $4.8 million. Should be worth it, and the overall budgetary situation for Des Moines suggests that should be certainly something to hold on to, player to hold on to. He'll have a couple of players coming off of the roster, off of the register. He's got $92 million as his budget next year, and at the end of the day, the salary will be down in the, I don't know, probably 80s, somewhere low 80s, high 70s. So overall, I don't expect that arbitration is really going to be a very big driver for anything that happens in Des Moines in the off-season anyway. Madison is another team that probably doesn't have a whole lot going on in arbitration. He's got a couple of Chris Wilson, the general manager there, has a couple of cases, both of them under $2 million, or all three of them under, or two of them under $2 million. Alan McHugh, catcher, and center fielder Jose Carlos Moreno. Neither one of them I would expect would be much of an impact as far as risk of being retained for too much more than that. So at the end of the day, I don't think arbitration will make a very big dent in the Wolves situation. Where we start to get into a little bit of a different tone of voice here, though, comes with Omaha, and in particular Emilio Morales, who's due for $9.4 million in his second arbitration year, and the emerging superstar in Morales, the third baseman, one of the leaders for the Sawyer Silk Award this year. It would not be too far, you wouldn't have to imagine too far to see him getting up into the 8-figure level if an arbitrator happens to feel particularly generous on that day. So I would say that Morales is certainly going to get his $9.4 million and could well wind up having more than that. Couple other key cases. He's got a whole bunch. Omaha has a collection of about 7 guys that are in the $2 to $4 million range. Adam Barnard is probably the most intriguing one as he enters arbitration for the first year at $4.2 million. Jimmy Starks Jr. probably would have been receiving more, but he did get hurt at the end of the year. 4.2 also is his push. Buck Munoz is at 3.6. Another intriguing one is starting pitcher Stephen Clulo at 3.4. Closer Jose Canales, who is a 2-time Egan Award winner, is only at 2.9. You think that it seems logical that might be a little bit low. Bottom line is, it seems to me that Omaha, of all the teams in the Frick Heartland, is at the most risk of ending up getting a November surprise, right, or an October surprise, whatever month we're in here. We're in November, a November surprise. And that could be anywhere from 0 to 6 million or so. It just kind of depends on exactly how arbitrators work with some of these guys. I doubt that they will be getting too much less than that, although you might see Justin non-tender a pitcher or two. Another intriguing one is Idris Mutumbe, who actually was a Super 2 and is due $1.6 million. My guess is that will still hang pretty well, but what you might find is that bumps Matume when he would have normally started his arbitration next year might wind up being a little bit higher. We'll just have to kind of see how that plays out. Leads us to Twin Cities. Twin Cities has obviously been a thorn in the Yellow Springs side. They almost took the division last year, and they have one of the probably the second most intriguing, maybe second or third most intriguing arbitration case in Mark Wareham at $10.8 million, 11.7 next year. You know, those are the numbers that Arthur Dempster is looking at, and whereas I think Dempster could end up being even a little higher than that, my feeling on Wareham is that that's probably about where he's going to wind up. I think that if Scott were to offer him lowball an offer, then the arbitrator would probably go higher. We'll just, I don't know exactly how that process really works. Twin Cities has 2 or 3 more cases that are a much lower profile. Relief pitcher Juan Suarez, and then 4 guys between $1 and $2 million. Carlino Omoboni, Jose Ordonez, Gerald Gonzalez, and Jerry Cole. I would expect that they would probably all be tendered. We'll find out for sure, although maybe Ordonez will not be. I haven't really looked at him too closely. Yeah, that's a question mark to me. Bottom line is, it seems to me that Twin Cities has the most intriguing single case with Emilio Morales right behind that. In the case of my own Yellow Springs, as we noted in the team news, we pretty much closed out arbitration. Everybody has been either extended or we're going to non-tender Baltasar Frontiero, Randy's favorite of my players because he can't play baseball. Obviously, he can't play baseball. 1.9 million's worth, so he will be available to everyone else who wants a guy who can't play baseball. And that brings us to the end of the Frick, which is actually kind of an interesting division in relative to the ones we covered in the Johnson League, because really there's not a whole bunch going on, but what is going on is some really high-profile players. So definitely could be impacting the way that this division plays out when it comes to the finances and how much it's going to cost both Twin Cities and Omaha there for some of their bigger players. And so that leads us over now to, I guess, the Frick League Pacific will be the next place we go, in Valencia. Valencia, being on a bottom tier, not too surprising again, has relatively little going on. It has Lee has a couple of cases. Derek Lee at third base is a $2 million case. He was a Super 2 last year at 1.8. One expects he will still be in this $2 million range and is probably still a value. The more intriguing one, and personally I would guess that he would be non-tendered, except I know Lee is a man without a home right now, so he may not be having enough time to really pay attention. But Petro Striuk, is that how you pronounce Struck? Is due $5.5 million, and he's really struggled here recently at 33 years old. It feels like that would be a non-tender. If he does tender him arbitration, I would certainly expect he would not get any more than that. And at the end of the day, Valencia's payroll is down in the 70s, $76 million. So I don't really see a decision there making a huge difference one way or the other on their build, since it's a one-year thing. That having been said, Valencia should be a team that is on the rise, and so that extra $5 million, depending on how it's used, could be this is a fairly key leverage point for them. So I'm interested to see what happens as far as Valencia is concerned. Moving on up into Hawaii, Mike Beiske has a collection of interesting decisions. Their overall payroll is down in the 40s, right? $48 million right now, and that doesn't include whether Pedro Hernandez is kept around, and my guess would be he will not be. I'm pretty sure Mike has already said that he would probably not be kept around. That would make actually the arbitration case of Matt Mills as a starting pitcher at $6.5 million would become the Tropics' top paid player, which gives you an idea of where they're at in the overall flow of things, right? They've got a whole bunch of young kids that they're going to be building their future around, and almost nothing else there. So either way it goes, Hawaii could be fairly big in the free agent market before it's all said and done. Stepping on up then to Long Beach, we actually find a team in a different situation. Long Beach came in third last year with 85 wins. They seem to be kind of a team in transition, and their arbitration situation kind of reflects that. The top guy is their center fielder, Tom Kazansky, due $6 million this year, $8 million next, as he finishes up his free agency, or his arbitration run to free agency. 3-WAR player last year. One fully expects he would be tendered that, and that $6 million seems to be a pretty good deal. Maybe it might bump up a little bit, maybe not. DH Juan Parra is due $4.4 million. A couple of starting pitchers in Irving Espinoza and Pepe, the Yellow Springs favorite Castillo, is at 4.2. Clearly he needs to be retained no matter what. Pierre Legrand also at 2.6. So what you see is a bunch of Long Beach arms are kind of stepping through arbitration together. And if you add up those arms, actually, it's a kind of an interesting situation, because they now got, 10, almost $11 million in arbitration cases that one would expect would go about their way, but you could see somebody like, Castillo really should be, hear my sarcasm, $8, $10, $12 million worth for his Louisville killing capability. But anyway, in all seriousness, Long Beach has some intriguing situations going on. I'm going to be very interested to see how their finances fall out. The McQuaid contract sits on their register now, which is a little bit of an overpay. And given that they seem to me to be trying to figure out exactly what's going on in their future, this arbitration process will go a ways to making that happen. Moving then to San Fernando, Randy's ball club is definitely in a upswing after an upswing. They have, as far as the Pacific is concerned, probably the most important and valuable case on the board right now in Taihoiwi, I believe is how you pronounce that. That first baseman slugger is due $11.6 million in his second year of arbitration. Would expect that would probably happen. I don't think Randy could get him for a whole lot less than that if he goes in with too much of a low ball answer. Arbitrator would probably go Wee's way. Two other interesting cases, actually the most interesting one underneath that is a much lower case of $2.8 million for Ernie Kinney, who had a spectacular year and as Randy noted, has been performing extremely well when he's not injured anyway, above ratings and whatnot. So that is actually a case that I could see going Kinney's way if he doesn't highball it too far. So maybe 3.5. I don't know what that number will end up being, but he's certainly worth at least that much and probably more. And we'll see what happens as he goes through the rest of his arbitration. It's Kinney's first year. So at the end of the day, I think that San Fernando actually has quite a bit riding on this right now. Their payroll sits at $97 million, and if they were to lose both of those cases and pay an extra $1 million, say, each, or $2 million each, you've got $2 to $4 million on top of that. and then wheeling dealing Randy would probably have to go wheel and deal a little bit in order to make some space for himself if he wants to do free agent ads and whatnot, which maybe he doesn't need to do. San Fernando is still set for bear, so to speak. Moving on up into the defending Landis champion. How do you like that, Ted? I'll say that once more for you. The defending Landis champion California Crusaders are actually sitting in some fairly okay situation when it comes to salary. Ted runs a pretty tight ship. It's always fun to watch and look at his salary structures and whatnot. He has a total of 4 cases. Only 3 of them are somewhat qualifying for this conversation. Shortstop Jesus Flores is due $6 million. He'll probably get that. That seems to be a fairly comfortable number. And then starting pitcher Jamie Mercado is due $3 million. Geez, I lost it. Where did he go? $4 million. Sorry about that. Worth every penny of it. No, I definitely think he'll probably get that also. I would assume both of those would be tendered, and so to me it seems to me like California is just got the ship pointed in the direction they want to go, and they'll be making little tweaks. They've got probably more to decide as far as how to replace 39-year-old Reynaldo Garza than they do worried about arbitration. Bottom line is Ted's team is a well-structured team and is fun to look at. You can learn a lot, I think, about the way to build a team by looking at that club. So that brings us to the end of the Pacific Division. Another fairly quiet division, whereas the Johnson League had a lot of movement going on in all up and down the divisions. Really what you've got here is California on kind of cruise control, just waiting to see what happens. San Fernando with a little bit of risk, but not in very bad shape. And Long Beach, I think, has got the most intriguing offseason when it comes to arbitration cases in the Pacific. So with that, we will move over to the Frontier, and starting with Boise again, with new general manager Ryan Wagman. Let me see, pull him up. And they have an intriguing set of arbitration cases to deal with, but very low risk. They've got Chris Rios at 3.2. That'll probably happen. Ron Mosley at 2. That might happen. Caleb Benavides. Dave Molina. Molina had a horrible year last year with a Super 2 $1.3 million award. My guess is he will do better than that, and he will stay with the team. The bottom line is that Boise is at $40 million of salary. They've got a lot of rebuilding to do, and I don't think that arbitration is going to particularly impact. There's no risk with the Boise Spuds at this point. So moving on from Boise over to Edmonton, the most intriguing case of all in certain intellectual ways, I guess, is Bobby Lynch's, because Bobby Lynch was obviously hurt early in the year. He's going to roll into Super 2 at $5.8 million projection, and that is intriguing to me because of the whole conversation about when Bobby Lynch should be brought up or not brought up, right? He was brought up early a couple of years ago, ended up pitching extremely well in a season where Edmonton really just didn't need him to pitch. And so now they're going to be spending $5.8 million, most likely. I would doubt that an arbitrator would give him more than that for an injured year, but again, we're talking about out of the park, so you just never know what's going to happen. So at the end of the day, if you look at that line just all by itself, there's a great example of what happens with Super 2. The difference here is that actually Edmonton's financial situation for next year makes this a non-entity, right? Again, they're $55 million in their payroll right now. Their budget is down low also. I don't think that $5-6 million difference, whatever, would really substantially impact what happens to them in free agency. I think they've got bigger issues to deal with before it's all said and done. Although perhaps him pitching more through the year would have brought more people in and increased the budget more rapidly. Anyway, I do find this one as an interesting one, both from a intellectual standpoint of how to manage Super 2 and arbitration, as well as how the arbitrator will actually deal with a superstar pitcher who has been injured. Compare these numbers as 5.8 to some of the other pitchers that are out there of Bobby Lynch's class, and by that I don't mean capability, but Super 2 year or first year, and that will be a key number to look at. Anyway, enough of Bobby Lynch. That is the primary item on the list for Edmonton. We'll move past Edmonton into Vancouver. And Vancouver is, as Joe has done such a fine job of documenting in his team news, really only has... his big item is Ray Perkins at $10.8 million, and he's clearly not going to be tendered, and Joe has come out and said that. Also have center fielder Keesop Park and closer Rodrigo Lugo at 3.8 and 2.5. I would certainly expect that those would be not too far out of. I don't think there's a lot of risk there as far as Vancouver is concerned. I would expect those awards to happen pretty much on schedule, and that Joe will be on to phase 2 of his Build Vancouver in the Joe Gahagan fashion. I believe I pronounced that properly, didn't I, Joe Gahagan? You can correct me on the board. So. Anyway, so that's Vancouver. Bottom line is I don't think a very big impact one way or the other. We move on to Calgary and Kevin Dixon's ball club. And again, you're going to find, lo and behold, another team that has relatively little risk. Kevin is another one of those general managers that I just love to watch work, because at the end of the day, you look at his ball club right now, he's got $109 million in payroll, the way it's set up. He does have a little bit of risk here in that Cesar Flores, his catcher, is listed at $6 million. I'm wondering whether that will actually be a tender or not. You would expect he would not make more than that. I think Flores is a one-war kind of player. So I wouldn't expect an arbitrator would give him any more than that, but you never know. More interesting case is perhaps right fielder Jared Davis. Is a cheapie and a replacement level player, but sometimes the arbitrators do weird things there too. Bottom line is, I don't think that Calgary has a whole lot of risk, and I'm interested mostly in what Kevin does with Cesar Flores, just because I'm interested in what Kevin does, not so much what a arbitrator will do there. And that leads us to the division-winning Seattle Storm. I have to say that for Nathan, because it's been a long run for Nathan, where I think he's had teams that have underperformed his expectations, and he went out and he yanked that division away from Kevin on day 163. So congratulations to Nathan. He has a couple of very interesting cases. The first and foremost is John Heckman at $6.9 million projection for his second year, and I'm wondering whether that is gonna stick. I'm wondering if that might end up being more in the $7.5 or $8 million range. We'll just kind of see. His next year's projection is 9.2, so that's a pretty big jump. On the other hand, he's coming from 4.3. So I don't know what the algorithm will actually do for him there. And then finally, we've got Esteban Sanchez at 3.6 million. And Sanchez started only, 7 games for them last year. That could end up being a non-tender. We'll just kind of see what Nathan's mindset is right now, because at $102 million of payroll and perhaps needing to replace a couple of players, that might be a place where he could pick up a few $1,000,000. So strategically, I'm more interested in that than what the arbitrator will do. And that brings us to the end of the Frick Frontier, which again is the Frick League is just in a kind of a different space than I think the Johnson League is. Again, this is a division that has a couple of intriguing and maybe big name players, rather than a series of players that need to be dealt with. So there we have it. There we have both the Johnson League and the Frick League. Hope you have enjoyed this, if you haven't already gone to sleep with my ramblings. And we'll see what our next special episode is. Have a great day. Bye. The Brewster Baseball Association is an out-of-the-park baseball league commissioned by Mr. America himself, Matt Brechtenwald, and competed in by 30 outstanding general managers. You've been listening to Arbitration Consternation, a special episode from the Brewster Baseball Networks. Music is Hey Mercy by Pierce Murphy and is used under Creative Commons Attribution License. Hang on for the next episode. See ya on the next rock.
It's a politician's song. Hey mercy, take your toll. Wait till it's all died. Count to 74. Oh, not with those green eyes. Take the pill and take some more. Hey, mercy, take your toll. Hey, mercy, get down. Hands up, I can't go on in this place. My rights, your blood. Don't catch you slipping, don't catch you slipping. Everybody say mercy. Will the young ones get to sing the dawning of a greater than? Don't you make a single peep, just send thoughts and prayers to mom and dad. Take myself out to the tool shed.